2 years after humanity vanished from Council space, the once mighty Galactic Council faced complete destruction. The crystal halls that had once echoed with proud alien voices now stood half-empty as desperate delegates argued over the scraps of their failing civilization Council Prime. Zekthar walked through the chamber where he had once mocked humanity and felt only shame. The massive room that used to hold representatives from over 300 species now barely had 50 delegates. Leftmost member worlds had withdrawn from the Council, unable to meet their obligations as their own societies collapsed. The economic reports on his desk told a story of unprecedented disaster. Galactic GDP had fallen by 70% in 2 years. Entire star systems had reverted to pre-industrial technology. Billions of aliens faced starvation as food distribution networks failed. Trade routes that had operated for millennia were now abandoned pirate hunting grounds. Zekthar stood before the remaining delegates and spoke words that tasted like poison in his mouth. "We have no choice," he announced, his voice hollow with defeat. "We must formally request humanity return to the Council." The silence that followed was filled with shame. Every alien in the room knew what this meant. The species they had treated as primitive servants would have to be begged to save their civilization. The proud rulers of the galaxy were about to surrender to creatures they had once dismissed as barely intelligent. Councillor Veltar rose from her seat. Her plant-like form seemed wilted and dying, much like the civilization she represented. "The Outer Rim territories have declared independence," she reported. "The trade networks have completely collapsed. Without human expertise, we cannot maintain our own star charts. We cannot even navigate between our own worlds anymore." The Agriculture Minister brought even worse news. 43 worlds are now experiencing severe famine. She said local populations are dying because they do not know how to grow food without human agricultural specialists. Some planets have lost 90% of their crop production. General Morkex of the Council Defense Force delivered the final blow to their pride. "Sir, we have lost military control of over half our territory. Pirates and raiders control the shipping lanes. Criminal organizations have taken over entire systems. Our fleet cannot function without human support crews and human intelligence." Network Zekthar closed his 4 eyes and felt the weight of complete failure. The mighty Galactic Council that had ruled space for thousands of years was being destroyed by the absence of one species. A species they had laughed at and dismissed. The most humiliating part was that they needed human help just to contact humanity. Their quantum communication networks had been designed and maintained by human technicians. Without those experts, the Council could not even send messages across their own territory. It took 3 months of embarrassing negotiations through neutral alien traders to arrange a single meeting. The proud Council that had once summoned humans to appear before them now had to beg for an audience. Ambassador Jin Wu returned to the Council chambers, but everything had changed. The human delegation arrived in ships that made even the most advanced Council vessels look primitive. 2 years of unrestricted innovation had transformed human technology beyond alien recognition. Jin Wu walked into the crystal hall where his journey had begun, but now he held all the power. The chamber that had once been filled with mocking laughter was silent with desperation. Alien delegates who had once looked down on humans now stared with barely concealed fear. The human delegation took their seats not in the back corner where they had been placed before, but at the center table, where only the most powerful council members had been allowed to sit. Nobody objected. The aliens were too desperate to argue about seating arrangements. President Kim So-ra appeared as a hologram from New Seoul, the magnificent capital of the human colonial union. The city visible behind her made every council world look primitive and backward. 2 years of freedom had allowed human civilization to advance at an incredible pace. "We are prepared to offer humanity full council membership," Council Prime Zekthar announced, trying to maintain some dignity. "Equal voting rights, preferred trade status guaranteed, representation in all council decisions." Jin Wu looked at his notes calmly, as if considering a minor business proposal. "That was our original request 2 years ago," he said quietly. "The same proposal you rejected with laughter." "Yes," Zekthar replied, his voice cracking. "We may have been premature in our assessment of human capabilities. The understatement hung in the air like a bad smell. Premature assessment. The council had not just been wrong about human abilities, they had been completely blind to the reality of their own civilization. Jin Woo consulted with his delegation, while the alien leaders waited in terrified silence. Finally, President Sora spoke through her hologram. "We appreciate your offer," she said, "but humanity has moved beyond the need for council approval." The words hit the aliens like physical blows. The species they had once controlled was now so advanced that they no longer wanted to join the council. They had surpassed their former masters completely. However, President Sora continued, watching hope flicker in alien eyes. "Humanity is not unreasonable. We are willing to consider a partnership. Not membership, but partnership. Equal terms, mutual respect, shared governance." The distinction was crucial. Membership implied that humans wanted to join the alien organization. Partnership meant the aliens would have to join a new system where humans were equals, or perhaps even leaders. Zekthar's voice was barely above a whisper. "What are your terms?" Jinwoo stood and presented a document that outlined humanity's new position in the galaxy. First, formal recognition of human sovereignty over all territories claimed by the Human Colonial Union. Second, reparations for economic losses incurred during our forced withdrawal. Third, complete restructuring of council governance to eliminate all species-based hierarchies. The demands were not cruel, but they were absolute. The aliens who had once treated humans as servants now had to accept them as the dominant power in the galaxy. Fourth, Jinwoo continued human oversight of all critical infrastructure to prevent future systemic failures. Fifth, establishment of human-led educational programs to teach alien species proper technological maintenance. Sixth, creation of a new galactic government with human representatives holding veto power over all major decisions. Each demand drove home the same message. The age of alien supremacy was over. Humanity was now the advanced civilization, and the aliens needed to accept their new role as junior partners. "And if we agree to these terms," Counselor Veltar asked, her voice shaking, "then humanity will consider resuming limited cooperation." Jinwoo replied, "Our engineers will repair your failing infrastructure. Our merchants will re-establish trade routes. Our security forces will restore order to the lawless territories. Our agricultural specialists will teach your people how to feed themselves." He paused, letting the weight of human generosity sink in. "But only as partners, never again as subordinates. The galaxy will be rebuilt according to human standards with human leadership and human values." The council chamber erupted in desperate discussion. Alien delegates who had once ruled the stars now argued about whether they could accept human dominance. The choice was simple: submit to human leadership or watch their civilization die completely. Some delegates protested that accepting human terms would mean the end of alien independence. Others pointed out that they had already lost their independence when their societies collapsed without human support. Council Prime Zekthar called for order and faced the most difficult decision in council history. As the leader of a failing civilization, he had to choose between pride and survival. "We accept," he said finally, the words feeling like admitting complete defeat. "The Galactic Council agrees to all human terms. We request immediate humanitarian assistance to prevent further collapse of our member worlds." Jinwoo smiled, not with cruelty, but with the satisfaction of justice served. The species that had mocked human intelligence now begged for human wisdom. The aliens who had treated humans as servants now accepted human leadership. Outside the Crystal Hall, Secretary Hyejin looked up at the stars visible through the dome. Somewhere among those stars, human colonies thrived, human ships explored new worlds, and human minds pushed the boundaries of possibility. The age of human subservience was over. The age of human leadership had begun, and the galaxy would be better for it. Jinwoo joined her at the observation window. The aliens had finally learned what humans had always known. Respect must be earned, and intelligence comes in many forms. The species they had, dismissed as primitive, had become their salvation. "Welcome to the human century," he said quietly as alien delegates signed documents that would reshape the galaxy forever. The final battle would take place at the heart of everything. The ancient space station that had been the center of galactic government for 3,000 years hung in space like a metal moon. Its surface was covered with weapons that could destroy, entire fleets and shields that had never been broken by any enemy. Commander Sora stood on the bridge of the New Earth, humanity's first real warship, built from captured alien technology and human engineering genius. Around her, the greatest fleet humanity had ever assembled, prepared for the assault that would either free the galaxy or witness the complete destruction of their species. The irony was not lost on her. 3 years ago, she had come to this same station as a diplomat seeking friendship and understanding. Now she returned as a warrior leading the largest rebellion in galactic history. 17 different species had joined the human uprising, their combined fleets finally outnumbering the Council forces. Admiral Jin Ho had learned from every alien tactical manual captured during the Long War. His strategy used something no Council computer could predict: the wild creativity of human problem-solving. When other species followed logical patterns, humans did the unexpected and impossible. Captain Wu Jin led a squadron of converted cargo ships in what appeared to be a hopeless frontal assault. The Council focused all their attention on his ships, exactly as Jin Ho had planned. While the aliens were distracted, Engineer Kitai's sabotage teams infiltrated the station through maintenance tunnels. No alien had thought to guard. The tunnels were built for repair robots. Not living beings, but humans were smaller and more flexible than most species. Kitai and his team crawled through spaces barely wide enough for their bodies, carrying explosive charges made from mining equipment and alien power cells. Deep in the station's core, the High Arbiter waited, confident in its power. It had crushed the minds of countless species, leaders over the millennia. No primitive race had ever been able to resist its psychic attacks. When the human commanders came within range, it would simply destroy their thoughts and end this annoying rebellion. But when the mental assault came, it struck against something the Arbiter had never encountered. Dr. Young-hee's neural shielding technology reflected the psychic attack back at its source. The creature that had ruled the galaxy through fear suddenly found its own mind under attack. The psychic feedback left the High Arbiter stunned and vulnerable for the first time in 3,000 years. It had never felt pain or confusion, or the terrible sensation of having its thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. What happened next shocked everyone in the galaxy. Commander Sora's fleet could have destroyed the Council station and everyone on it. The humans had every reason for revenge after years of slavery and oppression. But instead of unleashing destruction, they broadcast a message of surrender. Terms President Min Jung's voice reached every corner of the galaxy, not with threats of conquest, but with an offer of peace. The species that had been dismissed as primitive barbarians offered mercy to the beings who had shown them. "None, we do not seek to rule over you." Min Jung said, her words translated into thousands of languages. "We seek to end the cycle of oppression that has ruled this galaxy for too long. Today we establish not a human empire, but a galactic federation, where every species has an equal voice, where no race is slave to another." The transformation that followed was more remarkable than any military victory. Former enemies worked side by side to rebuild what the war had destroyed. Captain Su Min, who had lost her family to Council experiments, found herself training alien pilots in the techniques that had won the war. Artist Hyun Woo composed new symphonies that celebrated not human victory, but the unity of all species working together. His music played in concert halls across the galaxy, as beings who had been enemies learned to live as friends. Scientist Aram shared her research freely with alien colleagues. The knowledge that had been hoarded by the Council elite was now available to everyone. Medical advances that could have helped billions had been kept secret to maintain power. Now they spread across the galaxy like seeds of hope. Engineer Kitai established technical schools on dozens of worlds where humans and aliens learned from each other. The technology that had once been used to enslave was converted into tools of liberation. Weapons became construction equipment. Surveillance systems became communication networks. Dr. Young-hee founded healing centers throughout the former Council territory, treating not just the physical wounds of war, but the psychological damage left by 3 millennia of oppression. Entire species had forgotten what it felt like to make their own choices. Now they learned to be free again. The most profound change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. The Council had seen them as useful animals fit only for manual labor. Now former enemies sought to understand the human concepts of resilience, innovation, and hope that had made such an impossible victory possible. Former Admiral Jin Ho became the first human ambassador to the new Galactic Federation, working alongside beings who had once tried to destroy his species. The man who had planned humanity's military victory now helped plan the peace that would follow. The High Arbiter, stripped of its power but spared from execution, was forced to confront the magnitude of what the Council had lost. In their arrogance, they had dismissed humanity's greatest qualities as primitive weaknesses. They had failed to understand that stubborn independence could not be broken, only transformed into something stronger. Captain Wu Jin converted his warship back into a cargo vessel, carrying supplies to worlds devastated by the long war. His hold was filled not with weapons but with food, medicine, and the tools needed to rebuild civilization. The smuggler who had fought in shadows now worked in the light of a new dawn as commander. Sora took her place in the reformed council, chambers representing Earth in the new Federation. She thought about the journey that had brought them here. Humanity had reached for the stars seeking knowledge and friendship. They had found tyranny and oppression instead. But in fighting for their freedom, they had accidentally liberated an entire galaxy. They had shown countless species that there was another way to live among the stars. That strength came not from domination, but from the willingness to sacrifice for something greater than yourself. The Council had pushed humanity too far, expecting them to break like every other conquered species. Instead, they had discovered that some things cannot be broken. They can only be transformed into something that shines brighter than the stars themselves. For the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy looked toward the future with hope instead of fear. The age of the Council was over. The age of freedom had begun, and it would be led by the species that had refused to accept that the impossible was impossible. Humanity had won not by becoming like their oppressors, but by remaining true to what made them human. And in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever. 6 months after the Council gave their terrible choice, the alien ships came to human space like dark clouds, blocking out the stars. Each ship was larger than the biggest cities on Earth, and they moved with the slow confidence of predators who knew their prey could not escape. President Min Jung stood in the underground bunker beneath Geneva, watching the screens that showed alien fleets surrounding every human world. Her hands shook as she prepared to speak to all of humanity. The words she had to say would end the dream that had carried humans to the stars. My fellow humans. She began, her voice steady, despite the fear in her heart. We have no choice but to accept the Council's terms. The alternative is the death of everyone we love, every child, every parent, every person who has ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. The dismantling began the next day. Captain Sujin watched from the bridge of the warship Incheon as alien machines approached her vessel. She had commanded this ship for 8 years through asteroid fields and solar storms. Now she was ordered to surrender it to beings who saw humans as nothing more than useful insects. The alien technology made metal flow like water. The proud hull that had taken 2 years to build dissolved in minutes. Weapons that could destroy asteroids were pulled apart and scattered into space. The engine that had carried them between the stars became floating scrap metal. Sujin handed her command codes to a Trilak overseer whose compound eyes reflected no emotion at all. She had trained for 15 years to captain a starship. Now she would be sent to work in the mines like a common laborer. The creature took her codes and dismissed her with a wave of one crystalline wing. On the colony world of New Busan, Governor Taimin stood on the observation deck of the main settlement, watching council ships descend like metal vultures. The colonists had worked for 3 years to build their new home, cutting roads through alien forests and raising buildings that could survive the harsh seasons. The aliens brought their own machines, cold, efficient devices that dug deeper and faster than human equipment ever could. The ore extraction rate tripled in the first week, but the cost was terrible. The machines poisoned the soil and turned the clear streams into rivers of toxic sludge. When the colonists protested, energy weapons turned their homes into smoking craters. Families who had traveled across space to build new lives found themselves homeless on the world they had tried to tame. The message was clear. Humans were workers, not citizens. Their comfort and happiness meant nothing. Young engineer Kitai had spent 4 years designing fusion reactors that could power entire cities. His work was going to fuel humanity's expansion to 100 new worlds, giving them energy clean enough to terraform planets and strong enough to push ships to distant stars. Now he found himself fixing alien mining equipment in underground tunnels that never saw sunlight. His brilliant mind that had once solved the secrets of controlled fusion was reduced to replacing worn gears and cleaning dust filters. The aliens had taken his dreams and given him the tools of a janitor. His sister Yunbi had been the best navigation officer in the colonial fleet. She could plot courses through asteroid fields and calculate jumps between star systems with perfect accuracy. Her maps had guided the first human settlements to worlds beyond their solar system. The aliens assigned her to work in the processing plants, sorting raw materials with her bare hands. The computers that had once shown her the paths between worlds now displayed nothing but production, quotas, and efficiency ratings. Her knowledge of space navigation was declared worthless by beings who had never seen the beauty of plotting a course through the cosmic dark on Earth itself. The changes were just as devastating. Composer Hyunwoo had written symphonies that celebrated humanity's reach for the stars. His music had played in concert halls across the solar system, inspiring millions to look up at the night sky and dream of what waited beyond. The council declared his compositions dangerous contraband. Any music that spoke of human achievement or independence was banned. The symphonies that had once filled hearts with hope were now crimes punishable by exile to the worst mining worlds in the galaxy. Dr. Young-hee had been Earth's leading expert on alien biology. She had spent her life studying the possibility of life on other worlds, preparing for the day when humans would meet their cosmic neighbors. Her research was going to help humanity understand and communicate with the species they found among the stars. The aliens forced her to catalog genetic samples from conquered species. Her work became part of the Council's biological weapons program. Every discovery she made was used to create new ways to control and destroy the races that dared to resist their rule. In the hidden places where humans still dared to gather, former Admiral Jin Ho worked with smuggler Wu Jin to move supplies and hide refugees. They had no hope of military victory against the Council fleets, but they refused to let humanity's spirit die completely. Their networks passed messages between the scattered human worlds, stories of resistance and hope that reminded people of what they had lost and what they still had worth fighting for. They saved families from separation and hid children from the worst of the alien experiments. Captain Wu Jin had once carried trade goods between human colonies in his small cargo ship. Now his vessel was packed with refugees fleeing the worst of the Council oppression. He moved through asteroid fields and nebula clouds using routes too dangerous for the large alien ships to follow. The Council seemed satisfied with their work. Humanity was broken. Their expansion stopped their military, destroyed. The species that had once reached for the stars was now exactly what the High Arbiter had planned. A race of efficient workers who would mine asteroids and maintain machines for their alien masters. But the Council had made a mistake they would not understand until it was too late. They had broken humanity's body, but they had not touched humanity's soul. They thought that taking away ships and weapons and freedom would make humans into obedient servants. They did not know that humans grew stronger when pressed down. They had never met a species that became more united when faced with oppression. The aliens had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years by breaking the spirits of their subjects. Humanity was different in ways the Council could not imagine. They had taken everything from humans except the one thing that mattered most, the thing that had carried them from caves to cities to the space between worlds. They had left them with nothing to lose. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years by understanding their enemies. They had detailed files on every species they had ever conquered. They knew exactly how long each race would resist before giving up. They had mathematical formulas that predicted when rebellion would turn into acceptance. But humanity was breaking all their calculations. Dr. Young-hee had spent 2 years pretending to be a broken scientist, cataloging alien genetic samples for her captors, while the Council supervisors thought she was studying weaknesses in conquered species. She had actually been learning about the conquerors themselves. The Trilak with their beautiful crystal wings had a fatal flaw. The right sonic frequency could shatter their delicate internal structures like breaking glass. The Vorthak energy beings needed specific quantum particles to maintain their form. Disrupt those particles, and they would scatter like smoke in the wind. Even the mighty High Arbiter had weaknesses. Its mental powers came from a symbiotic relationship with microscopic organisms that lived in its energy field. The right electromagnetic pulse could break that connection and leave the galaxy's most powerful ruler helpless. When the human resistance struck, they struck with knowledge born of patient study. Captain Suman approached the Council command ship in a converted freighter, broadcasting fake surrender signals. The aliens allowed her to dock, thinking they were receiving more human prisoners. They never suspected that the cargo hold contained a sonic weapon, tuned to frequencies that would destroy every Trilak on the ship. The device was built from mining equipment and scavenged alien technology, but it worked perfectly. The crystalline beings shattered like expensive jewelry dropped on concrete. Across the galaxy, humans began using the Council's own superiority against them. The aliens had grown lazy after millennia of easy victories. Their ships were powerful, but predictable. Their tactics had not changed in centuries. They had forgotten how to fight an enemy that could adapt and learn. Former Admiral Jin Ho coordinated the human naval strategy from his hidden base on Titan. He had studied every piece of alien military equipment captured. By the resistance, he knew which ships had blind spots where their sensors could not reach. He understood how their formation flying left gaps that smaller vessels could exploit. The aliens had massive warships that could destroy planets, but they were designed for fighting other large fleets. Humans attacked with converted cargo ships and mining vessels that moved like schools of fish, dodging between the giant alien vessels too fast and too small to target. Effectively, Engineer Kite demonstrated the human gift for making something from nothing that the aliens had never understood. Where other species needed years to develop new technology, humans could rebuild their weapons using whatever they could find. His modified mining robots swarmed through Council stations like mechanical wolves. They were built from spare parts and held together with improvised welds, but they moved faster than alien security systems could track. They dismantled critical equipment and disappeared into ventilation shafts before the guards could respond. The psychological warfare proved even more devastating than the physical attacks. Composer Hyun-woo's resistance songs reached every corner of Council space. His music spoke of hope and courage in ways that touched the hearts of enslaved species throughout the galaxy. The songs were translated into hundreds of alien languages and broadcast on frequencies that penetrated the deepest underground facilities. Races that had accepted Council rule for generations began to remember what freedom felt like. They started their own rebellions inspired by human courage. On the mining world of Kepler 186F, the reptilian Saurak threw down their tools and attacked their overseers. The insectoid Klaxon on 17, different worlds began sabotaging the factories where they had worked as slaves. The energy beings called Photari started disrupting power grids across 3 entire sectors. The Council found themselves fighting not just humans, but dozens of species that had been peaceful slaves for centuries. The empire that had seemed unshakable was cracking apart as world after world joined the rebellion. But the most shocking discovery for the aliens was how humans treated their enemies. After capturing a Council battle station, the human forces offered medical aid to wounded aliens. The same beings who had enslaved them were now receiving food and medicine from human doctors. Captain Wu Jin rescued a crew of Trilak whose ship had been damaged in battle. Instead of leaving them to die in the vacuum of space, he brought them aboard his vessel and treated their injuries. The aliens could not understand why their former slaves were showing them mercy. This kindness proved more dangerous to the Council than any weapon-captured aliens returned to their own forces with stories of human compassion. Species that had served the Council out of fear began to question why they were fighting against people who showed such honor. Dr. Ahram established field hospitals that treated injured beings from every species in the galaxy. She worked alongside alien doctors, teaching them human medical techniques while learning from their knowledge. The hospitals became symbols of what the galaxy could be if different races worked together instead of one ruling all the others. The tide of war turned completely when the humans captured their first major council fortress. The aliens expected the usual pattern of conquest, followed by slaughter or enslavement. Instead, the humans did something unprecedented. They held trials for war criminals while offering amnesty to ordinary soldiers. They rebuilt damaged facilities and shared them with liberated alien populations. They turned weapons factories into schools and hospitals. They proved that victory did not have to mean revenge. Former diplomat Sora, now calling herself commander. Sora stood in the ruins of a council administrative center watching human and alien engineers working side by side to restore power to civilian areas. The woman who had once sought peace through words was now creating it through actions. The most powerful moment came when engineer Kite found his little brother Jay-Ho in a council prison facility. The boy had been scheduled for neural modification, but the human assault had arrived just in time. As Kite held his brother in his arms, alien prisoners watched in amazement. They had never seen conquerors weep with joy. They had never known victors who cared more about saving one child than claiming territory. The humans were rewriting everything the galaxy thought it knew about war and power and what it meant to be strong. The High Arbiter reached out with its mental powers to crush the human leaders, but encountered something that made it recoil in shock. Human minds that burned with such fierce determination that touching them was like grasping stars. The same emotions the Council had tried to destroy had become humanity's greatest shield for the first time. In 3,000 years, the Council began to feel afraid. They were losing not just battles but the loyalty of species across the galaxy. The empire they had built through fear was crumbling as world after world chose hope instead. The humans had revealed a truth the Council had forgotten. In a galaxy ruled by tyranny, the most revolutionary act was simple kindness. The species that refused to break had shown everyone else that there was another way to live among the stars. 2 years had passed since the Council first crushed humanity under their iron rule. The aliens had taken everything: ships, homes, freedom, dignity, but they were not finished yet. Dr. Namgi, the Council's lead expert on human psychology, had been studying captured humans like laboratory animals for months. His report to the High Arbiter was simple and terrifying. Humans were still dangerous because they could still feel. The emotions that drove them to resist came from their ability to love their children, hate their oppressors, and hope for something better. The solution was obvious and horrible. The announcement came on a cold morning when the artificial suns that lit the mining colonies barely penetrated the toxic clouds. All human children under the age of 16 would undergo neural modification. The procedure would remove their capacity for strong emotions. They would become perfect workers, content with their slavery, unable to dream of freedom. Engineer Kite was deep in the mining tunnels when the news reached him through the hidden communication networks that the Resistance had built. He dropped his tools and ran toward the surface, his heart pounding with terror. His little brother Jay-Ho was only 12 years old. The boy lived in the children's barracks where young humans were trained to operate alien machinery. Jay-Ho still smiled sometimes when he thought the guards were not watching. He still drew pictures of spaceships in the dirt when he thought no one could. Sigh now. The aliens wanted to take even that small spark of humanity away from him. Across 17 different worlds, the reaction was immediate and explosive. Humans who had been quietly accepting their fate for 2 years suddenly rose in coordinated rebellion. The message spread through every hidden network, every secret meeting, every whispered conversation in the dark. They had pushed too far. On Luna Station, former diplomat Sora led a desperate assault on the Neural Modification Center. Bao had traded her diplomatic uniform for stolen mining gear, and her careful words for weapons made from industrial tools. The woman who had once tried to make peace with the Council now fought to destroy their machines of horror. The rebels had no real weapons, no warships, no hope of military victory. But they had something the Council had never encountered before: the fury of parents who would die before they let aliens destroy their children's. Mines mechanic Jiho had spent months learning how alien technology worked while pretending to be a broken slave. Now he used that knowledge to build electromagnetic pulse bombs from mining charges. The devices were crude and dangerous, but they could shut down council equipment long enough for humans to strike on the agricultural world of New Jeju. Farmer Hisun led her community in burning the food processing plants rather than let the aliens use them. The smoke rose high into the atmosphere, visible from orbit, a signal to every human on the planet that the time for submission was over. Scientist Ahram had been forced to work in the Council's biological research facilities, studying human genetic material. Now she turned her knowledge against her captors. The biological agents she created could disrupt the energy fields that kept Vorthak lifeforms stable. When released into the air systems of Council ships, they caused chaos and confusion. The aliens had never faced anything like this rebellion before. Every other species they had conquered had followed predictable patterns. Initial resistance followed by gradual acceptance and finally complete integration into the galactic hierarchy. But humans refused to follow the pattern. Former artist Hyunwoo composed battle songs that were transmitted across human space on frequencies the aliens could not block. The music turned every act of rebellion into part of a larger symphony of defiance. Workers in the deepest mines heard the songs and knew they were not alone. Council's response was swift and merciless. Orbital bombardments turned human settlements into fields of glass energy weapons, vaporized entire city blocks. The death toll climbed into the millions as the aliens tried to crush the rebellion through pure terror. But for every human who died, 10 more joined the resistance parents who had watched their children taken by alien ships. Workers who had seen their friends disappear into experimental programs. Soldiers who had been forced to surrender their weapons but never their honor. Captain Woo Jin converted his small cargo ship into a mobile command center. His crew included former Admiral Jin Ho, who had spent 2 years planning for this moment, and pilot Sumin, whose knowledge of Council patrol routes came from months of careful observation. They had no military vessels left, but they had something better. Cargo haulers and mining ships converted into guided missiles loaded with fusion bombs. Humans who were willing to die if their deaths could strike a blow against the oppressors. The first major victory came when the Resistance destroyed the primary neural modification facility on Kepler 442b. The explosion was visible from 3 different star systems, a pillar of nuclear fire that announced to the galaxy that humanity would not surrender their souls. The cost was enormous. Thousands of human lives lost in the assault, entire families wiped out by the alien response. But the message was clear. The Council could kill human bodies, but they could not kill the human spirit. Engineer Kite led a team of saboteurs into the heart of a Council command station. They moved through maintenance shafts too small for most alien species, using their knowledge of human construction techniques to navigate systems the aliens had never thought to guard. When they reached the main computer core, Kite planted charges made from mining explosives and fusion cells. The explosion that followed took out the communications hub for an entire sector, leaving Council forces blind and confused for precious hours. On Earth itself, resistance cells struck at the remaining alien facilities. Dr. Young-hee, who had been forced to work on biological weapons, turned her laboratory into a fortress. The humans who fought beside her were miners and farmers and teachers, but they fought with the desperation of people who had nothing left to lose. The High Arbiter tried to reach into human minds with its psychic powers to crush their will to resist. But it found something it had never encountered before: humans whose minds burned with such fury that touching them was like grasping molten metal. For 3,000 years, the Council had ruled through fear and overwhelming force. They had broken countless species and turned proud civilizations into obedient servants, but they had never faced a species that grew stronger under pressure, that became more united when threatened with extinction. The rebellion spread faster than the Council could contain it. What had started as desperate acts of defiance became a coordinated uprising that stretched across dozens of star systems. Humans who had been scattered and broken found each other and remembered what they were fighting for. The galaxy watched in amazement as the impossible began to happen. The species that had been dismissed as primitive slaves was fighting back against the mightiest empire in known space, and somehow, against all odds, they were winning.